Hello, game devs. Today we're going to talk about creating an instantiated object. In other words, creating an object. We're going to be talking about how to add force to that object. And we're also going to make sure that the object only fires once every little bit. So we'll see how much we get to in this video, and there may be a part 2. What we're going to do is we are going to first identify all the pieces of the first-person camera. As we can see, there's 3 pieces. There's the player camera, there's the head joint, and then there's the first-person AIO. So what I want to do is we want to go into our code. And why don't I actually go to my scripts, and I'm going to create another script. And this script is going to be called spawn bullet. Okay, so we should be able to fire off, a projectile into the world space. To do that, we're going to need to do a couple different steps, but we should be able to do that pretty quickly. The other step that we want to do, and we want to set up all our stuff, is we are going to create ourselves a new object, and we're going to go game object, 3D object, and we're going to make a sphere. And we're going to size the sphere down. We're basically going to create a little bullet. And I am also going to want to create a material. Oops. Where is material? There it is. This material is going to be called bullet. And bullet material, I'm just going to give it a black. Our inspector is still locked onto our first-person AIO. The last time we were working on it, that lock button there will lock and unlock what you're looking at and selection. So now we can get the bullet texture, and we can get maybe like a black, just black. And then I'm going to apply it to the bullet. So now we have ourselves a little bullet. The other thing we need to do, if you remember from before, this has a sphere collider, which is a collision object. But what we need to do, because this bullet is going to move around and we're going to add force to it, we have to add a component and we have to add a rigid body. So rigid bodies, once again, are physics, is how to turn on physics, as it were. Use gravity, is kinematic, interpolate. You can go through all of these again if you would like, but this is just the bullet we're manufacturing. Now that we have that, I'm going to take this bullet and drag, I'm going to go here and rename it bullet, which we haven't done yet. And drag it into the prefabs material folder. All right, now that we've done that, let us go into our scripts and see this spawn bullet. I'm going to make sure that this is added to my character first-person AIO controller, because otherwise... So this says, children of a prefab instance cannot be deleted or moved, and components cannot be reordered. So what we want to do is drag it right to the bottom. So just in case that pops up, you have to drag your scripts to the bottom of a prefab. Otherwise, you're reordering them, which can mess things up. And then let's open up spawn bullet. All right. So the first thing let's do is let us figure out what bullet it is that we need to fire. If we remember our variables, we can create a public variable. So public, capital G, game object. And then this game object is bullet we'll just call it bullet. And let's put a little comment that put the bullet we want to fire here. And then let's hit save. And one of the things that you're going to want to get used to in programming is saving and checking. Every single time you make any code, you want to go into your console, and this is not a bad error. That was just something weird with my Unity editor. As you can see, if you hit clear, no errors stay up. If you hit clear and there's still an error there, that is definitely broken. So once we do that, we can then put the bullet inside of our object, first person AIO. And I don't want to put this bullet, the one that's in the hierarchy. In fact, I can delete that. And if I scroll down to the bottom, we can see bullet has a empty game object right there, right? So I'm just going to put, oops, not that one. I'm going to go to the prefabs folder. I'm going to find my bullet. I'm going to put bullet in the spawn bullet. So this is the thing we're going to want to spawn. It's not doing anything yet, but we've still got time. All right. So let's think about keyboard commands. So in Unity, getting the keyboard or mouse is probably one of the most important things we can do. So the way we do this is see the void and start and update, the void start, void update functions. We're going to stay outside of those because we're going to create a new function. This is outside of our update and start function because whenever we create new code, we try to keep the update and start function as clean as possible, start less than update. So we want to call our code from a separate function. So void input handling, open parenthesis, close parenthesis, open brace. So in the input handling code, we are going to have ourselves, this looks like a different piece. Void my inputs. Okay. Input handling. All right. So inside input handling, we're going to put an if statement. You remember those if statements? If this, then that. So in this case, it's going to be if input, oops, input dot get key down, and then open parenthesis again, and then see that it automatically highlights key code and then the key that it needs. So key code dot space. Now, just so you guys know, just so you all know, there is every single button in here. So you can just go look for them. There are also joysticks, as you can see. There's also ways to say generic buttons. If you're using Rewired or anything like that, you can code your buttons to like, attack button or B button. And then those will automatically map to whatever console or system you have, depending on whether or not you have that plugin. So it's a really good plugin to have. Later on, we'll be playing around with it. Grab it if you can. So anyway, if input get key down, key code, space. Sorry, that took a second. Had to describe all the buttons. And then we're going to open brace again and press enter. And so what this is saying is if the condition of the player pushing spacebar, then do the stuff in here. Now there's two other kinds. There's get key down, which is the first time. It says returns true during the single frame the user starts pressing down on the key identified by the key code. There's also get key up, which is when you release the key. And then there's get key pressed, which will allow you to monitor and fire off a message or code every single time or every frame that the key is down. So if like you're gaining health or something and you want to hold down the button, that would be where to do it. All right, so if all that is true, then what do we do? Well, we have to create it. So to create something, since we have the object we want to create, which is great, we're going to type in big G game object. And then we're going to type in projectile. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a new game object out of nothing. So we're going to call this projectile. Oh, we have to put declare it first. So game object projectile equals. So now this is the instantiation process, the creation. Instantiate, open parenthesis, and then what do we want to instantiate here? So we want to instantiate bullet. And where do we want to do it? So we're going to hit bullet, comma, and look at that. It says transform parent. Transform is the XYZ coordinates. So start connecting the language between things. Bullet transform dot position, comma, quaternion dot identity. Now, don't ask me what quaternions are because I don't exactly know, but this is a three-dimensional math. It's like what angle and position and pitch out roll it's supposed to be at. The position's just like where it's at. Quaternion identity. And then out of this, you say as bullet dot, or excuse me, projectile. Oh, excuse me, I missed a pit. So game object projectile instantiate bullet transform quaternion identity as game object. There we go. Finish my code line. So this is creating the object. So once we create it and we put it at the right position, this is a good first step. But then we have to actually apply force to it. Projectile. So game object, projectile, instantiate this. So what we're doing is we're creating a new game object called projectile, and then we're creating a bullet and adding it to that thing. The reason why we're doing that is then we can use this projectile.get component to go get the rigid body that we created. So we're going to say rigid body. That's the thing we're trying to get. And then open parenthesis, close parenthesis, period, add force. See all the different adds. Add force, transform dot forward. Remember when I was talking about the ways to map controls? Transform dot forward is a way to say, hey, whatever direction it is, just go forward. And then times 10. And then and the semicolon. So let's go check our code. Very important to do all the time. Console, first I'm going to check to see if there's any bugs. The hello world, there's an issue with that, but that's okay. So my script's on my character. All right, so this should maybe work. Oh, I see we've used spacebar as well as part of this. So let's change key code space to key code like Z. Just because it's messing stuff up. All right, so that's not working. All right, so I fire and it looks like nothing works. And you know what? I think that's because, again, we forgot to call our input handling command. So of course it's not going to run, right? Input handling, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. So it's good to keep our code organized with functions, but then we also have to remember to call them. So now save. And then let's press play and start hitting that Z button. Z. Oh, look at that. You can see those balls pop out of the ground. Poof, poof. Well, that's fun. Not exactly what we wanted, but we've created them. So, all right, good first step. I think we're going to have to do a little bit more, obviously. So, the first thing we should do is maybe we will mess around with the bullet. Maybe the bullet has a problem. So let's turn gravity off of the bullet so that it just goes forever and ever. Or maybe we might mess around with stuff. I'm just going to turn gravity off for now just to see if it will go on forever. There you go. Whew, very slow bullet. Also, if you notice, it pushes me out, right? See, because these have rigid bodies on them, we're going to actually need to spawn this slightly off of where the character is. So if we go to our first person AIO joint, and we see which way is straight. All right, so we're gonna go transform.position plus 10 times transform.forward. So what this is saying is add 10 towards the forward of whatever it is. And let's see if that changes anything. There we go. It spawns way far away now. So maybe not 10, but look at that. It now spawns farther away from us. So now that gives us a little offset pretty quickly. You can mess around with that later on to get things firing off. But we're going to make that a little bit more robust instead of just 10. Why don't we make another public game object? Public, or not game object, a variable, public. And let's see, what is this? This is probably a float. Float. Player bool offset equals 10. Because we can always give it a default variable, change it off later, or maybe not 10, maybe 2, because it was really, really far away. And then instead of 10 here, we're just going to say offset, playable offset. There. So, useful, right? Playable offset. If we press play, we can hit spawn, and we can observe that that is now a little closer together. There we go. So other than like maybe the speed or whatever, like there's a lot of stuff we could still mess with, and we will in a little bit, but I think that that works for now. So let's get them moving a little faster. Let's get them destroying stuff. Okay. So get component, rigid body, add force, transform forward.10. So let's say public float bool speed equals 10 to start times bool speed. Oh. So we can change the speed in which we apply force. So maybe we'll make that 30. That won't really do too much, but other than spawn them and make them go faster. So let's make a bullet script. Remember our hello world script? We know how to do triggers now, right? So what we want to do is we want to create a C# script called bullet, just plain old bullet, and we're going to add this to our prefab, which we need to go navigate towards prefab, bullet, and we're going to go to the bottom, and we're going to add a component. Oh, this is a material, excuse me. Prefab, bullet, and then I'm locked here on the inspector right now, so unlocking it. Drag this script, new script bullet, on to the bullet prefab, or add component, probably easier. Bullet, add that. Okay, so we have our bullet, or bullet script. We have our prefab bullet, which has the bullet script on it. And now we're going to want to use this object, which has a rigid body, and we're going to say void on collision enter. And it gives me all that code. And then we're going to say destroy collision. Oops, that's collab property. Collision dot game object. Oops, lower C collision dot game object. There we go. And then semicolon. So this is going to destroy anything that it touches. It's a very dangerous weapon. even though it moves very slowly. I'm just going to display this, Z. There we go, that bullet fires and kills stuff. But one of the problems, though, if we, we'll see if it will work. There we go. Is it's got to destroy itself as well. So destroy game object, and then game object dot destroy big G game object. And you know what? I'm just getting a little tired of that really slow bullet. So we're just going to mess around with the speed of that. Let's go to spawn bullet. Let's go to default speed is 150. And then because we need to set that there as well, let's change the, because if we change it in code, it won't necessarily update if we have a value that is different. So let's say 150. There we go. I see. Destroy game object. Now if I press play, it'll destroy the bullet as well when we fire it off. Oh, that went underneath. Ha ha ha. Oof. All right. But one of the problems here is it destroys everything, right? What if we only want to destroy these red things? So let's open up in Unity in the inspector. We have this tag. So we're going to add tag, and list is empty. We're going to add a new tag to it. Red capsules. We're just going to be very straightforward right now. But these could be enemies, for instance. You could tag things enemies or destroyable walls. You know, maybe there's a certain kind of weapon that opens up certain walls and certain weapons only act on certain things. So this is a really easy way to identify and separate things out pretty quickly. So now that we have that tag, we want to say destroy collision, blah, blah, blah. We want to actually have an if statement here. And we want to destroy the game object every time it hits something. But instead, we're going to say if red capsules, or if collision dot game object dot tag, see that tag, and then let's just get game object tag. I want to see the if collision game object dot name equals blah blah blah. So if tag is equal to red capsules, then destroy it. I gotta move my brace. And either way, destroy itself. So if we press play, now only that red capsule should probably work. Z hits the thing, explodes, and this is probably the only one because I didn't tag all of them. Oof. That was weird. It pushed it away opposed to destroying it. But that's probably because of something we did. Probably a spelling thing. Oh, look at that. I actually didn't tag any of the capsules. So let's tag the capsules and then apply it to all. So now all the red capsules should have tag red capsules. All right, good. Whew. It's always confusing. There's always a little thing that that you have to remember to grab. So this doesn't destroy, but the bullet appears. And then this should, bam, destroy. Awesome, excellent. Whew, we're starting to get a bullet. So here, let's watch one other thing that we want to fix now. See how I can fire bullets a lot? Also that they're touching each other and blowing themselves up. So what we want to do is we want to set a timer. We want to create something that allows the player to only push something at a certain time. So to do that, we're going to need to go back into spawn bullet behavior. And we're going to want to go in here and we're going to say public float timer equals 0. And then float public float goal time, or we should say target or bullet spawn time equals, let's say like once every 1 second. So we're just going to say bullet time spawn time equals 1, and then timer equals 0. So what we're going to do is when input key gets down, we are going to begin counting upwards until until the timer is equal to bullet spawn time. So in input handling, not input handling, excuse me, the update function, we are going to, and we're just going to keep it in the update function for now, but we could separate this out later on and call it, we want to do one other thing. We want to say public, or we can say this one private bool ready to fire equals true. So we want to say ready to fire is equal to true, and when you can't fire, can't do it. So now the best way to do that is, see this if statement, if input get key down, we're going to type in ampersand for and. So both logic needs to be true. We could actually change this to be up to be bar, and that would be or, but right now we're doing ampersand. We're going to say ready to fire equals true. All right. And then when ready to fire is equal to true, we're going to fire the bullet. So we're going to just say ready to fire equals false. We're going to set it to false as soon as we fire it. And then we're going to say, I think actually that's going to be okay. That's all we're going to need to do. So in our update function, we are going to say if ready to fire is equal to false, then what we want to do is do this logic. Timer plus equals time dot delta time. Oh, whoops, equals true. I had a issue there. So if ready to fire is equal to false, so whenever this is fired, start the timer. And then timer plus, so what this timer is like, like a timer on your phone or whatever. But what it's doing is adding delta time. Delta time is a really important concept in computer programming, and it's something that you may not have come across. So think about it this way. Every computer is able to process a frame at a different speed. But, sometimes inside games, like let's say you're playing a game and it's running 60 frames a second. And the reason why it's running 60 frames a second is because it's only running 1,000 processes. Well, what happens if you add another 1,000 processes? Perhaps the frame rate might go down to like 30, right? That means we now have 30 frames a second. So how do we make sure that the time clock, the clock that is like real life time, how do we make sure it's always the same? So what we do is we sync all of our time into frames, and we measure the real clock time. The computer does this, the time.deltatime function. It measures the period between the last frame and this frame in real seconds. And then this code here adds that to the timer. So you'll see it'll go up in float increments often, but you'll see that it'll go up. So if ready to fire is false, time plus time.deltatime is true. And then what we want to have is another if statement. If timer, is greater than or equal to 1, or not 1, we want to go up here and use the correct bullet spawn time. So if timer is bigger than 1 second in this case, then what we want to do is ready to fire is equal to true. So this is a timer, and this will allow us to, and maybe we'll put this public, maybe I'll put this public just so that we can all see it together. Let's go select our first person AIO. Let's hit lock. Let's go to the bottom. Let's press play. We've got ready to fire on the bottom right there. You can see it here. If I hit Z, look at that, it's ticking up. Oh, it looks like ready to fire actually continues to set to ready to fire. You know why? Because our timer, we never reset it. We have to actually reset that back to 0 as well. Almost forgot. So if timer is true, timer equals 0. So we need to set that back to 0 so we can reset our timer. And that's one of the nice things about having all this stuff exposed, is that, you know, you can quickly bug fix and play around with things. There we go. Now, no matter how much I spam this button, it's always 1 second. Also, it'll hit that wall and do nothing. All right, so almost everything is there. I think really the only thing that we haven't done is that this bullet really only fires straight. Now, that might be what you want for the character, for like a Doom type game or a classic game, but maybe you actually want that bullet to kind of fire off from our character controller. So let's go into spawn bullet. Let's go find where it's doing stuff. So we want to fix that so it will go in all the directions. We want to get the camera angle in order to do that. So we've declared a public camera, my camera, so that we can access the my camera rotation, etc. And as we have this game object projectile, instantiate, blah, 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 projectile, get component, rigid body, add force, transform.forward. So we're going to just change one thing. Instead of the forward of the character, we're going to say my camera dot transform dot forward. Okay. From there, then we're going to actually access the camera angle instead of the player angle, which will give us the ability to shoot bullets in any direction. There we go. Now, there is a couple issues. The bullet seems to be coming out of like my belly. And, you know, these are just normal things that we can just mess around with later on. But now we have ourselves a shooting camera controller that will shoot bullets or whatever it is we want. And we can interact with different things at different ways. So that was a lot that we went over today. That was a lot that we went over in this video. We have figured out, let's just go over it. We have figured out that we can create a timer that will allow us to have a cooldown on our power or our bullets. This is also the same timer that, by the way, we could add in if we were thinking about whether or not we wanted to have a timer for the game. You know, you could put this in the menu or whatever. We can use this a lot of different ways. And then the other thing we did is we had input. We figured out how to get input into our game so that we can use that. We use the Boolean command that we used before and the if statements to kind of create ourselves a trigger. And then we instantiated the bullet, and then we set the angle of the bullet, and we used physics to push it along. So I didn't really mention too much about this add force thing. I'll just go over that. Add force is one of the physics commands that we can do to rigid body, and it's kind of like a one-time push. So you could consistently add force, but we're just adding force. And because it does not obey gravity, in fact, we could turn gravity on, and we could observe how these bullets change in behavior. But because there's no gravity, Newton's law, right? Everything in motion stays in motion. So without gravity, there's nothing. But let's say you want to create more of like maybe a lobbing grenade kind of effect. You could easily add that. And as you can see, I can't even see it in my main menu because it's not a lot of force. Let's see if I can throw that up. But you can see it in my scene view, and it just kind of. So, you know, it depends on what it is that you want to do. But physics objects and materials are really valuable. And hopefully now you have yourself a first-person shooter camera. So what I would like you to do is follow along with the assignment to extend this first person system so that you can have a more fully fleshed out game idea. You're going to need to do a lot of extra little stuff, but most of it can be done with the statements and objects that I have provided you today. With that, I will see you in class.